Hi, this is Sandy.
This is Howie.
And I'm Marty.
And this is Jay.
And we're Jay and the Americans.
And you're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton on 3SCR KC Radio.
Just to begin with, what are your first memories of music gaining an important role in your life growing up?
My first memories of I had a sister. I had an older sister, and she was a singer as well. And in the house, she constantly played Bessie Smith, Frank Sinatra, the Four Freshmen, Ella Fitzgerald, and that's what I heard as a child growing up. So I guess you could say my roots were, kind of into that jazz pop oriented thing. And my sister was a torch singer, like a blues singer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just soaked it up, and that's where I got the basis of my music from. The first popular style that I heard that led me, were all the great, black artists in the States. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Muddy Waters. That's when I separated from my sister's genre of music.
Was Jay and the Americans your first professional band?
No, actually, we were a combination of two bands. I was in a trio with my girlfriend, who was actually the lead singer, called the Harmonies. And we had a record out, actually on J. Arthur Rank organization, Jarrow Records, that got played and got a little success locally. But then, and Kenny was in the group with me. He was the third member. I wrote the songs, played guitar, she played piano, and she sang lead, and Kenny and I sang background. And we decided we didn't want a girl in the group anymore, especially when I broke up with my girlfriend. So we formed an all-boys group, and that became Jay and the Americans.
Uh-huh. Now, I believe had things panned out differently, we might now be talking about the history of Binky Jones and the Americans.
No, that's quite true. And when we formed a boys group that was a combination of a guy was singing lead for the Mystics, and the Mystics were managed by the same person that managed the Harbor Lights. And he was very unhappy being the lead. He was the second lead. He replaced the first lead. They had a hit record called Hushaboy. And he was miserable because they weren't treating him right. And we loved his voice. Kenny and I both loved his voice, and we asked him if he wanted to join us and form a boys group. And he said absolutely, because he had heard us sing harmony. Kenny and I sang really good harmony together. So he said, no, that would be great. So he left the Mystics, came with us, and I called my best friend from Brooklyn, Howie, Kane, and that unnamed group of rehearsals and rehearsed, and went to Lieber and Stoller for an audition, and we pounded on their door till they finally listened, and they were going to name us Binky Jones and the Americans. And Jay just said, I can't go through life being called Binky Jones. So his name was John Trainer, and his nickname was Jay because his father's name was John also. So we came back to Lieber and Stoller and said, how about Jay and the Americans? See, the real reason for that was they couldn't call us the Americans because you couldn't copyright the Americans.
Ah.
You see, that was the reason that Lieber and Stoller wanted to have a different, name in front of it.
Uh-huh. Now, I believe your first major
because
hit...
of the registration patent. Go ahead.
Your first major hit, She Cried, was originally a B-side, but there's quite an interesting story about how that became to be the hit.
Oh, that's right. The A-side was supposed to be Dawning, which was based on Peer Gynt's Suite, which was written by, I believe, Lieber and Stoller. They wrote the lyrics. And some guy in California, a disc jockey, fell in love with this flip side and locked himself in the studio and played the record for like 18 hours straight. Just played the record over and over. And then the record took off. I mean, it was just, it crept across the country, city by city, until it was number 3 in the nation. Had it exploded everywhere at the same time, it would have been a number 1 record. But that was the first Jay's big venture onto the charts, and that was the start of Jay and the Americans as a international act, actually, because that record was played everywhere.
How influential were Leiber and Stoller in the development stages of your career?
We only wanted, we you know what, we were kids, we were young teenage kids, and we loved the records that they made. Leiber and Stoller were really the first, not only great songwriters, but they were independent producers. And they produced artists like Benny King, Clyde McPhatter, the Drifters, and these were all people that we became a singing group because of listening to those records. I mean, when we heard the Drifters and we heard the violins soaring on Benny King's and the Drifter records, and the horns and the Latin percussion, I said, these guys are making orchestration records, making incredible arrangements. And we just, you know, they were before, and they were doing all of these breakthrough things that nobody else had done before. And we just wanted to be with them. Never mind the fact that they wrote Hound Dog and Kansas City and Stand By Me and Up on a Roof and all these incredible songs, but they produced those records as well. So we said, you know, we were kids, we wanted to go for the best, and they were the best. We walked into that office, we were like the little white kids, we were the new kids on the block, and being with the Coasters and the Drifters was like a dream come true, just being in the same office with them. And Jerry and Mike, they were just so talented. I mean, we heard them write songs. Like they wrote a song for Peggy Lee while we were there called Is That All There Is? And they wrote, you know, Burt Bacharach used to come in and ask them advice with Dionne Warwick, you know, how should I do this, arrange this record, and how should we produce this record? And Phil Spector was hanging out, you know, just hanging out, going for coffee, bringing them coffee. So they were like the legends back then. And we only wanted to be with them. And you know, you only want to be with the best, right?
Yeah.
And we pulled it off. We got lucky, and we were with them.
I believe that there was a point in time.
So,
there was a point in time though where the better material was being given to groups such as the Coasters and the Drifters to record. Was that a little frustrating for you at times?
it was, you know, it was very, but we kind of understood it. Actually, what happened was Jerry and Mike did She Cried and Only in America and that stuff, but they got so busy with Atlantic Records and I'm Not Erdogan and the Drifters was so hot and so much more of a bigger act that naturally that, you know, it's a business. So they were giving the prime material the first choice to the Drifters and the Coasters and Benny King and, you know, those people, and then we would get the leftovers. So they finally said they were even too busy to produce us and gave us to outside producers. And that's when we started seeking our own material. But the interesting story is when we were up there, they said, "You want to hear the new Drifters record?" And we said, "Sure." And they took us in the office and they played a song by the Drifters that they were giving, then about to give to Atlantic Records to be released, called Only in America. Now, this was 1960, I guess, 3 or 4, and the record, it seems the man, we fell in love, we went nuts. We said, how could you not give us that song? We're Jay and the Americans, and singing Only in America would be such a natural thing. Not realizing the political consequences, because this was a black group singing Only in America before civil rights was invented.
Yeah. And
it was totally invalid for them to sing that song, not musically, but lyrically, because they're singing about, you know, Only an American kind of guy from anywhere, go to sleep a pauper, wake up a millionaire, and become president. And you know what? That just became a valid lyric last year, or 60 days ago.
That's right.
you know. But the real story is that Ahmad Ertegun heard the record and rejected it and said, I can't possibly release that record. That's a lie. For a black artist on my label to sing those lyrics is an abomination. So they threw the session back in Jerry and Mike's face. And unbeknownst to us, they said, well, you know what, Jay and the Americans want to record this song, because now they were stuck with all this money that they spent on recording the Drifters, and it was wasted money out of their production company. So they call up the young kids that don't know anything and said, hey, how would you like to buy that track by the Drifters and put it out, as a record for you, like they were doing us a big favor. And we said, sure, we'd love, we were crazy about the song. We were destroyed that it wasn't given to us initially. And we went in and actually paid them out of our, session money, bought the track back from Atlantic, because we were on United Artists Records, and Jerry and Mike put us on the Drifters track in their key. So we had to sing the song in the Drifters key, which wasn't the right key for us, and sang to their, pitch. And then it didn't sound really all that great because it was in the wrong key. So they sped the record up, and if you listen closely to Only in America, we kind of sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks, because they sped it up so much that it really isn't a flattering sound, but it became a big hit for us.
Yeah.
And we never, being naive young teenage guys, we never realized the ramifications of the political aspect of it, nor did we realize the business end of why we didn't just go in and cut it in the key we wanted to sing it in. Now we know the reasons, looking back and reflecting, and we've been with Charlie Thomas of the Drifters many times, and we've kind of, relived the story now as grown adults, both of us knowing, where it came from and how it went down.
Now, just as success came your way, you lost your first J. John Trainer decided to leave. Did that unsettle things for a while?
Yeah, it sure did. What happened was there's an expression in the States, I don't know if it's true in Australia. A little birdie flew in onto his shoulder and said that Phil Spector was interested in producing him as a solo artist.
Mm.
And with that bug in his head, he figured, wow, and Phil was hot with the Ronettes at the time. And he figured, well, maybe he should leave the group and be a solo artist. Ego is everything, especially when you're young. And he has said since that day that it was, probably the biggest mistake he ever made in his life. We're friends now to this day, and we speak about it, and we all kind of laugh, but it wasn't funny back then. We were left in the lurch. But fortunately, the guy who was playing guitar, he was our guitarist, the guitar accompanist, and he sang in another group as well with a guy named David Black called the Empires. And actually, Marty was making more money because, Marty got paid a salary to be our guitar accompanist, so he was making more money than the actual guys in Jay and the Americans, because we got what was left over from the gigs.
Mm.
And so he said, I don't know this guy, Dave. I said, well, let him come down and audition. And he came in and auditioned. And I said, sing. And he came to my parents' basement. And we went solo, we're looking for a new Jay. And they, oh yeah, sure. Right. I mean, they weren't living or dying by us anyway. So I don't think they were that upset, because they had all of these other acts that were making hit after hit after hit. And Marty had Dave come to my parents' house, and I said, sing the song that'll show your voice off the best. And guess what song he auditioned with? He decided to sing a song called Caramia for his audition. And before he got halfway through with the song, he said, listen, you're not Dave anymore. Your name is Jay, if you want to be Jay. And he said, yeah, sure, I'll be Jay. And we started working on the arrangement to Caramia. But the company, the United Artists in all their wisdom, fought us for 4 years about recording the song. They thought it was the stupidest idea and the stupidest song they ever heard, because they were writing rhythm and blues songs. They had no idea that this could be a hit. And after having 4 hits in a row, we then demanded at United Artists that if they don't let us record Caramia as a record, we're not going to record for them anymore.
Yeah.
So we finally had the clout to demand that. But still, they held our feet to the fire. They said, sure, go ahead and record it. They put us in the studio with one of their house producers, who's a really good guy named Jerry Granahan. And Jerry Granahan, I don't know if you go back that far in rock and roll and doo-wop, but Jerry had a record called No Chemise, Please, and he was Dinky Doing the Don'ts. It's just an old-time group, but he was a great guy. And he was a staff producer for UA, and he came in, and we kind of had it all arranged and done, and he recorded it in the studio, and UA just put it out as a B-side to placate us. They had another side that they were pushing, that they owned the publishing and that, all of that kind of business stuff. And that record never got any play, and they were promoting it, and they booked it, they were pushing us on all these TV shows because we did have some hits. And they booked us on The Tonight Show, thinking we were going to sing the A-side that they were promoting. And being from Brooklyn, we decided to do what we wanted to do and what we believed in. And we handed out the charts to Caramia. And when that show went off the air, the phones at NBC television rang off the hook for 3 hours. Everybody wanted to know where they could buy that record. So UA was forced to flip the record over, and that's how Caramia became, like a huge top 5 hit.
You had a fantastic run of hits during that.
Yeah,
You had a fantastic run of hits during that time. Is there any one song in particular for you that stood the test of time more so than any other?
Well, you know what? Each guy has their own favorite song. My favorite song during that time period was Come a Little Bit Closer.
Uh-huh.
I thought that embodied a real Latin flavor, because there's a tremendous amount of Latin percussion and Latin horns playing on that song. And it was a story song. It was kind of like El Paso, but Latin, Jay and the Americans version. It was kind of a unique song that still to this day when we perform, it's one of the top 3 requests in the show. The 3 biggest songs that we have are, as far as requests, A Couple Closer, This Magic Moment, and Caramia.
Yeah. I always thought
we've had a lot of hits, but
I always thought your records.
My favorites come a little bit closer.
I always thought your records were very high in their production values. How much input did you guys have into the overall sound of your records?
Well, we did have a great input because when we went to the outside producers, we didn't write the songs. We went out and gathered the songs. We started at a time when there were professional songwriters and we had professional singing groups. It was when the Beatles came in and Dylan that it was self-contained and self-written. And we started to get into that, but we were picking the songs and arranging them. And then we would go work with the producers and the A&R people. And they would decide after we recorded what song the record company was going to release. But we had a great deal of input into the styling and the arranging of the songs. It was always the big lead singer with the big harmonies, around it in the backgrounds, the featuring the background harmonies. And we had a lot of input. Actually, towards the end, we did our own producing and our own records. The last 2-3 albums were produced actually by me. It was Jada Productions, and I was the executive producer, but I was doing all the mixing in the studio. We were all doing the arranging together, and we had different arrangers that worked with us. Thomas Jefferson Kay was a big arranger that worked with us. I mean, we had a lot of very talented, we had the biggest people in the business working and playing on our sessions. But the input did come from the group, particularly the Americans. You know, Jay had the big voice, and he would decide if he liked a song or didn't like a song. And sometimes we would force an issue. Sometimes we'd do a song he liked. Sometimes he would do a song that we liked. But it was a unit. You know, we all put our heads together.
Now, you supported the Beatles during their first trip to the United States. Any special memories of that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a funny story about that. We went to the Washington Coliseum, which was the Beatles' first show. It was prior to the Ed Sullivan Show in the States. And the Washington Coliseum is a huge indoor coliseum. In other words, it's not like an outdoor stadium. It's an indoor hall, but it's huge. And as we drove, you know, we had several hits, and the Beatles were first coming here. And they were first being played on the radio. And there was this big fuss being made about them. And, you know, we didn't realize how good they were going to be. We hadn't made up our minds yet, because we were listening to She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand. And we went, as we pulled up to the Coliseum, we look at the marquee, and the marquee says, The Beatles and Others. And we got a little ticked off, you know, and we said, wait a minute, you know, these guys haven't, what have they done yet? And, you know, we had like, you know, 2-3 big hit records, and we weren't even mentioned, and neither were the Righteous Brothers mentioned, or the Chiffons mentioned, and we said, you know, what's the deal? I mean, I was really annoyed. So were the other guys, but, you know, we rolled with it, and we went inside, went to the dressing rooms, and then we were sitting there after sound check, and we saw Ringo make that statement. They were interviewing them like crazy. There was all kinds of press there. And they were being interviewed, and one of the reporters said to Ringo, you know, how'd you find America? And he said, we made a left at Greenland. Now, we're 4 guys from Brooklyn, but we cracked up, and we said, you know what? These guys are a little hipper than we're giving them credit for. Because to us, they sounded like a garage band.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we were trying to make very high-tech records. We were in the studio going through the technology and making, you know, big orchestras, big arrangements, big harmonies, and then we heard something that sounded like, you know, 4 kids in their garage, you know, with a tape recorder. And we didn't realize that the stuff that they were playing then, they were 3 years advanced from that in the recording studio at the time. And another funny story is that Murray the K, who was a big DJ in the United States, we heard him playing She Loves You on the radio, and he had a very big show in New York. And he said, listen to that, man. He says, these guys, you know, they're making a big deal out of them. And, you know, they're just, they sound like, you know, they were saying what we were saying. They sound like a garage band. And with their long hair and their accents. And then 3 weeks later, he was touting himself as the 5th Beatle and hanging out in their dressing room because the hype had caught up.
Yeah.
So, you know, we saw all of that go on. But anyway, we're in the stadium, and we finished the interviews, and everybody's there, and we go downstairs. And first the Chiffons go on, and the place is sold out, and the kids are screaming like you saw on television when the Beatles landed at the airport. And the kids are just screaming, so every act that went on was getting, you know, hurry, we want the Beatles, we want, you know, in between each song, you know, we want the Beatles, we want the Beatles. So the Chiffons escaped with their lives, and the Righteous Brothers went on, and they were, you know, lukewarm received. And then we went out, and, you know, like I said, we had three good hits. And Jay, who was at the time, you know, the second Jay, right? He was a very quick-witted guy, and he walked out, and you could tell that the audience was getting really impatient for the Beatles. And he said, hey, I'm glad you all waited for and came to see us. And the whole place cracked up and started to laugh, you know? And it kind of warmed them up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we sang our songs, and they gave us a really rousing, you know, applause and kind of a lukewarm, almost an encore, right? Which was better than any of the other acts had fared. So then we went off stage and we went downstairs, which is where the dressings were. They were underneath the arena in the basement. And then the word went out, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles. And a sound went up that I have never heard since. It was the loudest scream. And usually, you know, when a roar goes from an audience, it peaks, the needle pins, and then it drops back. Well, this shriek went up, and the sound that reverberated in that closed arena into that basement was continuous for like 5 minutes. It did not go down 1 decibel. It just kept on going and going and going. And we held our ears and we all looked at each other with these huge question marks. And then we said, something just happened here. Because, I mean, I remember Elvis, but nothing like that, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And we were there at the beginning, and we experienced, so we knew, you know, this is real. We're witnessing a huge change, you know, at the moment that it happened. And it just continued from there. You know, and then we began to appreciate what they were doing because the albums started to catch up with where they were actually at the time.
Now, for a while there, you had in your band Walter Becker and Donald Fagen, later of Steely Dan. What do you remember?
Yeah, we discovered those guys. They walked into our offices one day. They were very frustrated. There was a place called the Brill Building where everybody that was anybody had offices. It was a music building on Broadway. It was 1697 Broadway. And all of the big publishing companies and record producers and artists, if they were big hit artists, had offices in the Brill Building. So we opened offices after our hits to promote ourselves. We were producing ourselves, and also to maybe promote some new artists if we could sign them up to our production company. And one day in walked these 2 strange-looking guys. One, you know, they're wearing dark sunglasses, twin sunglasses, and twin raincoats. And one had black, slick, greasy hair, and one had long, blonde, greasy hair. They looked like 2 serial killers, okay, to be honest with you. They're very strange-looking guys. And Marty was the first one to see them. They came and they said to Marty, listen, nobody will listen to us because we don't have a demo tape or a demo record. All we have is sheet music, and we can play it. And nobody will give us a listen. And they said, you know, but you're our contemporaries. Do you have time to listen to some songs we wrote? So Marty says, sure. And they played one part of a song. And Marty knew immediately that it doesn't take much to know when you're in the presence of somebody that's a genius, you know. And these guys were brilliant. So he comes running into my office and says, Sandy, there's 2 guys in my office. They're really weird, but they're brilliant. But go in and listen and don't let on how good they are. Maybe we can sign them up and screw them over. So I said, well, okay. I said, let's see what the deal is. And I walk in and I listen, and I knew right away that this was Rodgers and Hammerstein, you know. These guys were writing songs that were way ahead of everybody else. And I said, what's the story with you guys? They said, we have no money. We have no place to sleep. We just graduated Bard College, and we need to get our career going, and we need some help. And I said, okay, here's what we'll do. You have no place to sleep. You'll come home to my house. One of you sleep on my couch. One of you'll sleep on my floor. My wife was far from thrilled, but it went down there that way, and we hired them as our bass player and keyboard player until we could get some demos on them and start taking them around to people. And that's how they became our bass player and keyboard player.
Yeah.
They played with us for a while. We took them to everybody. We took them to Donnie Kirshner. We took them to Clive Davis. You know, their songs and the records that they did. And everybody, you know, again, you know, people can be right and people can be wrong. Everybody passed on them. Donnie Kirshner, Clive Davis. They're much too hip. You'll never get an audience. They're not commercial enough. So we kept trying with them and trying, and finally we got into a big spat with United Artists legally, and Becker and Fagan was signed to us. So we gave them a release because a friend of ours, Gary Katz, loved the stuff. You know, he was around our offices and he was a good friend. And we said, here, you take them, because we're not going to let them become an asset of United Artists. They have no vision whatsoever. And he took them out to California and signed them to A&R, as an A&R guy to ABC Dunhill. Spent the year making the album, Can't Buy a Thrill, and the rest is history.
Yeah, certainly is. So what was the
Boy, those guys could sure play.
They still can.
Huh?
And they still can.
Oh, yeah, they still can. Yeah. And they still can.
So what was the catalyst for the breakup of Jay and the Americans in the 70s there?
Well, what happened was, it's like we were together from 1960 with the first Jay. We started with the second Jay in 62 or 3. And we're on the charts from all those years, pretty much every year, one way or another, through 1971, which was Walking in the Rain. That's a long time for a group to be together.
Yeah.
And you start to grow apart. You start to grow apart both musically and socially. Wives and, Jay number 2 had a few issues with gambling and a lot of stuff that wasn't what we were about. We were looking to be Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and he was looking to be Mario Lanza. There was a fork in the road with when Caramia came into being a big hit record. It changed the direction that we had in our heads, where we wanted to do these really great harmony records, and he just wanted to blast away with these songs, and so sooner or later there had to be a parting of the ways.
So what kept you busy in the time from then up until the recent reuniting of the group?
Well, what I was doing was, first I went to ABC Dunhill, I was the director of A&R on the East Coast for a while, and then I was the casting director, musical director of a show called Beatlemania that ran on Broadway for almost 6 years at the Winter Garden Theater, and toured. Played in California for a couple of years, played in Chicago for a couple of years, and every Beatle band in the United States right now graduated from that show. It's amazing. There must be 100 of them that I schooled and trained to be, Beatle bands. And then after that, I just went into publishing and production, and I understand there's a record out in England right now that I produced by a group called the Tuneful Trolley that's making a lot of noise, and it must be 40 years old.
Wow.
It's called Island in the Sky, and it's on Now Sounds in the UK. I just heard about it. They released it, and they're raving on it. We kept our hand in, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In the music business without doing that. You get older and you don't want to travel anymore. You don't want to do that. You got a family, you got kids, you're starting to be the age where you have grandchildren. You don't think about that anymore. Except for the Rolling Stones. They still think of that. Then this opportunity arose, So that's what I was busy doing in those times. I was reconciled to not performing anymore. Occasionally I'd do some arrangements and harmonies in the studio work and things like that. But I wasn't looking to have a record and go on the road,
Yeah.
And besides, you start to feel like you're not valid anymore, and the music business is, all young kids like when you started out, and you start to feel like a dinosaur, So you don't even entertain that thought. But then, there's an expression that man makes plans and God laughs. And what happened is Jay number 2 had been performing all of these years as Jay Black, and Jay Black and the Americans went bankrupt. And the name was going to be sold off by a federal bankruptcy trustee. It's going to be auctioned off. And I was scared that it would fall into the wrong hands and they'd put these phony groups together. So I bought the name with my son to protect it. And really all of the guys that I was friendly with all these years, the original Americans, they all said, you'll never get the name. Somebody's going to buy it for, real money and and, and sure enough, I wound up winning the bid, buying the name, and they all said, well, why don't we get back together and find a new Jay? And I said, you got to be kidding. You want to go on the road? And they said, sure. Why? It would be fun. At this point in our life, now it would be fun. Before it was fun because we were kids and we didn't know what was happening the next day. We didn't know if we'd live to be 35. But now it's a wonderful experience. We actually enjoy meeting the fans and going to cities that we actually, go sightseeing and go to bed after the show and don't wait for the light to hit our eyes at 6 a.m. Partying all night and doing that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing now. And now we're on a mission to keep the music alive, to keep that kind of music alive.
Now, I believe Jay number 3... I believe Jay number 3 was actually going to form one of those bands you were worried about.
Exactly. He had bid on the name. And thank the Lord, I won the bid. And we always tease him about that. You said, you would have been our worst nightmare. You're exactly what we didn't want. Because he would have had no originality to it.
Mm.
It wouldn't have been as valid. It would have been a tribute band using the real name. And now it's the real Americans and a new Jay. And since the precedent had been set already where there was already more than one Jay, and there's certainly been a lot of valid groups with more than one lead singer in its career. And this guy's really good. I mean, he sings both the J1 songs and the J2 songs with great validity and great respect. I mean, he's not goofing on it.
Yeah.
He's sincere in his attitude towards the songs.
I believe...
And we're in the studio now with him, re-recording some of the old things the way we do them now, and recording songs that were never recorded by Jay and the Americans before. Both, reworked songs, which was something we were famous for doing, like Walking in the Rain and This Magic Moment, and originals like She Cried was an original, and Tonight was an original, and Come a Little Bit Closer was an original. So we're doing the same thing as we always did with a whole batch of new material and re-recording the old stuff the way we do them in 2009. And we're doing them in the studio with Gary Katz, the guy who got Steely Dan for us. So it's kind of come full circle.
Fantastic. That's great. Was there any tentativeness amongst you? Was there any tentativeness amongst you guys?
That?
Were you tentative at all that you may not be able to recapture what you once had?
We went into rehearsals. It's like I said that, we're going to try and do this. There was nothing definite. And like I said, this thing happened for a reason. Nobody made Jay go bankrupt but, Dave Black. And nobody presented this opportunity. I mean, God, this thing happened by itself. It just fell into place. It wasn't the plan. And when we went into the studio and we tried the third Jay out, it might have worked, it might not have worked. If it hadn't worked, if it hadn't been really great, none of us would have wanted to go back in and climb back into the ropes into the ring and lose whatever respect we had already. You only got something to lose if you go in and you're less than what you were before.
Yeah. That's true.
I mean, if the Stones don't go out there and pull it off, or if Aerosmith don't go out there and pull it off, it's sad. It's not a joyous thing. And I don't want to do that, So we were very careful about that. And we rehearsed long enough to make it, we knew when it was good. And then we took the show on the road, and now we're recording, and we're making records better than we did back in the day. And for some reason, I don't know if it was because we laid off for 35 years, or we're just so damn enthusiastic, or God was good to us physically, but we're singing better than we ever sang before. I mean, we recorded Let's Lock the Door, which was kind of our bubblegum Jay and the Americans record.
Mm-hmm.
Let's Lock the Door and Throw Away the Key. We re-recorded it the other day. And I got to tell you, before we were through singing, and I said, you know what? We're singing this song twice as good as we ever sang it when we recorded it back in the day. You know, you kind of know when these things go right. You know, it's magic. And we are singing better than we were back then. And this new Jay is fun because he's so exuberant. I mean, he's doing this for the first time.
Yeah.
He's being a rock and roll star for the first time. And we're doing it for the second time. So we look at it entirely differently, like we're getting a kick out of him. And yet we're enjoying it for ourselves too.
Yeah, it sounds
You
like
know, it's very gratifying.
sounds like an infectious enthusiasm. An infectious enthusiasm going right through the group by the sounds of it.
That's what it is. We love, you know what? I can't speak for other groups that have been singing the same, 3 or 4 hit songs for 30 years. They must be really tired of it.
Yeah.
I can understand that. But we haven't been singing for 35 years. So we're going out there and we sing Even She Cried, which was our first hit, and Carry Me. And these songs sound fresh to us every night. We can't wait to go out and sing. So we've got an enthusiasm that I'm sure we wouldn't have had we been singing for 40 years straight.
Yeah.
You just can't get that enthusiasm and keep it alive forever. Unless there was new things to sing. And we're just singing the old stuff with enthusiasm. Now we're going to have some new things to sing as well. So it's pretty exciting. Being on the back nine and having this much fun is kind of unusual.
Has Jay number 3 encountered any issues with old fans wishing to still see Jay Black up there with you? Sure. You know what? There's always, like somebody that comes to a show, and whether it's with knowledge or without knowledge, says, I thought, Jay Black was going to be here. And we always leave a message at the box office that if anybody is disappointed or did not read, because we advertise very, clearly that it's Jay Renke. Yeah.
With the 3 original. No, we don't try and fool anybody, okay?
Yeah.
And when we come out on stage, we even do it in the first song we sing. Only in America we tell the story of the 3 J's right in the middle of the song, right where the solo is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
We talk and get it clear. So we always tell the box office, if anybody wants, is upset, tell them that they have a choice. They can go in and listen to the show. If they are still disappointed, their money will be refunded.
Uh-huh.
If they don't want to go to the show, they can have their money immediately. We've had people, 5 or 6 people at one show, and this was early on, that we probably legitimately didn't know and were ticked off and everything, and we made them that offer, and no one has ever seen the show and asked for their money back.
Oh, that's good.
As a matter of fact, one of the ladies that complained the loudest at the last, about a few shows ago, wound up spending $50 in merchandise at the end of the show and having us sign the T-shirts and the hats, and she was the biggest objector. It was really funny.
Yeah.
And he said, listen, go see the show. If you're disappointed, you'll get your money back. And she was, would you sign this to me? Oh, Jay number 3, you're fabulous.
That's terrific. So what is the extent of your touring now?
Well, we're up, you know what? This is we're starting the 3rd year that we've been together now. And we're up to about 60 or 70 jobs a year. We travel Canada every year. Our biggest dream, the place we want to go the most, is Australia.
Fantastic.
Just because, honestly, but we have to get enough interest in Australia for them to want to, it's a lot of money for us to go to Australia and to have it be, profitable. But we want to see that country and visit that country, and we know we have fans there.
because we have gotten correspondence from, not millions of people, but certainly, 10 people in different areas of Australia that request, when are we coming, how can they see us, and we would love to come to Australia.
No.
I mean, it's just a place that, as we say, it's on our bucket list, because we've never been there.
Yeah.
And it's a country with so much to see and experience. Particularly, Marty is a herpetologist. He's so into the wildlife, and I'm I'm into marine life. I want to dive the Great Barrier Reef before I pack it in. So, but I also want to sing in Australia.
Well, I might send you
love to come.
I might send you some contact information for some agents down here and see if we can get something happening, because I'm sure there'd be a demand for a Jane Americans Australian tour.
Well, we would kill to be there. Honestly, it's the place that we always talk about. We've got to get over there somehow.
Right. Well, before our phone drops out again, I'll let you go, Sandy. Thanks so much for your time and being so generous with it today.
Don't be ridiculous. And any more information you need, just email me.
Will do.
Any help I can be with any projects, I'd be happy to be there.
Fantastic.
I hope this was fruitful for you.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Okay?
Take care.
And I will get you I'll get you the new CDs when we're finished. We're almost done.
Please do. That'd be great.
Okay?
Thanks a lot, Sandy.
And good day.
All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.